Hi there, this is Professor Jurus, and I wanted to make you a quick video on how to do a three-color gum print. So in our last video, I showed you in Photoshop how to go through and separate the channels. And what I did then is I went to my printer and I printed out each channel. You can see this one's labeled red. I can't actually see where these are labeled, but I did label them on the transparency so that I would know which color that I was going to print with these. And then what I'm going to do is print these with a color that's kind of resembles cyan, magenta, and yellow. I don't actually have those process colors yet. I ordered them, but I don't have the process colors yet, so I'm just going to kind of wing it with some colors that I do have on hand and make a studio gum print. And we'll see how that goes. So you'll get your transparencies ready first when you're going to make one of these and have them all lined up. Now, I always print mine in color like this, in the full color, but you can print them in black and white if you want to try to save some color ink and see how that goes. I think I will try that on my next digital transparency. I'll make them just black and white rather than the colored and see how that, if that prints any better or any worse. Okay. So the next step is going to be the paper selection. So what I've selected to use for this print is Artistico Fabriano, a really nice hot pressed watercolor paper. And I'm going to just be using this paper unshrunk and unsized. So I'm just using it right out of the package right here. Now it comes in like a 22 by 30, and what I'm basically going to do is tear it in half, and then I'll have to tear a little bit off of the thing so it'll fit in my smaller tray. But you want to make sure the paper will fit in your tray size before you begin too. And you can use any watercolor papers that are hot pressed. I really recommend using a quality watercolor paper though, and especially don't buy those like tabs of paper that look like canvas on the inside that just say watercolor paper. That's really not what you're looking for. The really textured watercolor papers and cold press watercolor papers don't really work that well for this. And if you do like buy those, then you do really have to use the gelatin sizing on them so that the colors will not absorb into the material and get all your highlights stained, and all the white areas would be stained if they weren't sized. But this is a hot pressed and it is semi-sized to begin with. So this is what we're gonna use. So one of the things I was talking about early on in the class was the watermark. So here I have a better picture of the watermark that you can kind of see that it says Artistico Fabriano, and this is printed right into the paper. So this is the way that I can tell what side of the paper that has some sizing on it and which side of the paper that I'm going to print on. So when I can read the watermark, that is the side that you print on. And of course, if you flip it upside down, the writing's going to be backwards, and then you'd be looking at the back of the paper. So it's important that you choose the side of the paper that you're going to print on. And again, since I'm tearing this up, the name is only going to be on one part of the piece of paper. So I take a pencil, and what I do with the pencil is I put a little X on each corner of the paper if I'm going to tear it into two or tear it into four, so that I have the emulsion side, or the side of the paper that is the coating side. So that coating side is marked, so I will be able to tell which side of the paper I'm going to coat on. If I put this in a pile, say I tear up about 10 sheets of this and get them ready, I want to and look at them later. I might forget which side was up, and with watercolor papers like this in particular, it's a little bit hard to tell the side of the paper that's the correct size. So you want to make sure that you mark the paper when you're tearing it up. And one of the things that I like to do at this point, after I have my paper torn up, and you can see the nice decal edge that's created right here by putting a T-square down and tearing the paper, is lay my transparency down on top of this, and I will just trace a pencil line down on there. Now, this could be one method of registration, depending upon your printer and how accurate your printer prints each of the transparencies. The image on the transparency is the same exact place. So if you if you put your transparencies all three together and like kind of tap them so that on a like table or something, so their edges are all perfectly aligned, and then lay them on a light table. If they are in registration, then this method would work for you. I did that with mine and looked, and one image was a little bit more to the left on the transparency than the other one, so I couldn't use this method of registration. But what I'm going to do is show you some different methods of registering the print, or registering the transparencies. And the reason you need to have them registered is once you print an image, and you'll see this as we go on, and you have the image, and then you recode it with the next color watercolor paper, you can't really see where the image is once it's coded. So you can do it all at one time at the beginning, or you can do it before you recode again. So once you have the image down there, you can like line up your transparency and mark where it's going to be exactly, and then use that as your registration also. So this is just a picture showing you the multiple transparencies laying down on top of the white paper. So what you're going to do for the push pin registration method that I'm going to show you is you want to go on a light table, or put this on top of a light table, and line up all these transparencies together so that you have all three transparencies aligned. When you look through it, you don't see any shift from the image, so the image is all lined up under all three. And this is what I use to create my registration holes in the paper and through the transparencies is push pins. So what I'll do is once those transparencies are all lined up, I'll take one of these push pins and I will actually push it through the two top corners, the top left and the top right. And then I will actually lay that down on top of the paper using my pencil mark, so I know where the transparencies kind of go, and I'll push those holes through the paper. So by doing that, and I'm not going to make any more holes. So by doing that, every time I take one transparency, and even if I can't see the picture, but I put the push pins through the transparency through the same exact holes, and then I lay that down over top of the coded image. I just align those push pins to the holes that are in the paper, and then I push the transparency down and tape it using blue painter's tape, and then it will be in registration. So it's a real simple way. And if you don't have any push pins handy, another thing you could use is, and I've done in the past when I didn't have any push pins, is get two sewing needles and just put a little tape around the top part where this thread usually goes through, so that you can hold them, and you can use two sewing needles as kind of like a homemade push pin. But the idea is that you put a hole through the top left and top right of the transparency through all of them at one time when they're aligned, and then you push that through the paper just one time so that you have a hole in the paper, and when those push pins align with the paper, the transparencies will be aligned. Now this is another way that you can line up your transparencies in Photoshop, is by printing these alignment marks and registration marks, so that you can print these out on the transparency. And this is real handy. And what you could actually do is you could actually put your push pin right through that hole too, and like line up all three transparencies, and then push your push pin through one of these spots. But again, you'd want to do two of them at the top so that you have the exact thing. And you can see right here these transparencies aren't aligned. The one underneath it is a little bit off to the left. I kind of skewed that over so that you could see. So when you're doing this, what you're going to do is you need to make sure that the transparencies are all lined up and that these are all lined up. And again, they may not all print the same exact place on the piece of Pictorico. So, depending on the feed that you have for your printer, mine's you just kind of justify it to the left when you're putting it into the printer. And sometimes it might be off like a 16th of an inch or something. So like about what that is. But you can easily, line them up. The idea is that they're just not all going to line up by the size. In other words, so you have to line them up visually before you put the push pins through. And here's just a quick picture of the push pin going through all three transparencies, so you could see. And the push pins and sewing needles are nice because I like the push pins better, but because they will pierce the material fairly easily. So you want something that's going to pierce it, and the push pin will go right through it easily. So will a sewing needle. And here you can see the view of me getting ready to push the push pins through the paper. So I've pushed it through the paper with all three transparencies lined up. Now once you've pierced all three transparencies, before you do the paper, you can actually just do it with one, because the holes are going to be the same exact place on the transparencies once the transparencies have been registered. So then the next step is going to be, excuse me, getting your colors mixed. Now, I ordered these little bottles, but they didn't come in yet in time to do this print. So I'm just going to be doing it with these little pill bottles that I had, and I found three of them laying around. So these will work just fine. And what I did is I put 4 cups of, or 4 capfuls of gum arabic into here, and then I squeezed this whole tube out into here. So this is only gum arabic with your pigment. Do not add the potassium dichromate with this, or it'll go bad. This is just for your gum arabic if you want to do it this way. And this, I think this is a lot easier way to do it with your colors if you can get some bottles that are all the same size, and then just measure out. For the tube, I found that this works really good with these small tubes that you get from Bostic and Sullivan, or from the school bookstore. Um, I think they're okay. I just checked to make sure, and these were the tubes from the bookstore, the pigment, and there are 5 mils of pigment in there. So I put 5 mils of pigment to 4 caps of gum arabic from the using the cap from the gum arabic bottle. And then I put it in. I poured the gum arabic in here first, and I squirted this whole tube of pigment or watercolor paint into there. And now what I'm doing is I'm actually using a popsicle stick. I broke a one of those craft sticks. I broke it in half, so that it'll fit in here real nice. And then I'm actually mixing it a little bit with this before I go to the next step, which would be shaking it. So for the next step, the shaking it, make sure you put the lid on tight. And if you're using film canisters, a lot of students have done this using the 35 millimeter film canisters. You need to make sure you hold the lid down tight when you're shaking it, and because the lids will pop off. For some reason, it tends to build up a little bit of pressure inside. Um, and if you actually shake up a film canister and let them set down, sometimes the lids will pop off of them because of the like gas that builds up in there for some reason. But a screw-on lid is better, but you can use the film canisters. If you did do that, you might want to take like an X-Acto knife and just put a little slit in the lid so that the pressure can come out of it once you have it mixed. And you can always just put a piece of tape on top of that when you go to shake it again, like say in a week. If you're going to use the pigment a week later it's in one of those film canisters, you could shake it. But don't, if you're going somewhere to print, like say you and a friend are going to get together and print and stuff, it's probably not a good idea to use those film canisters. Those don't travel well. Something like this would travel much better. And just put these in a Ziploc bag and make sure the lid is tight if you put them in your backpack, because you don't want to you don't want to spill this stuff all over, inside a bag. So the next step is you're going to measure out a certain amount of pigment, depending upon the size of the print that you're going to make. And I found a teaspoon container, or like a measuring cap. And what I've done is I've put a teaspoon of the gum arabic that has the pigment in it already in this jar. And then I add 1 teaspoon of the potassium dichromate. And then I can use that stick to stir it up a little bit. I want to make sure again that it's mixed very consistently. I don't want to see any globs of paint in it. It needs to be stirred up really good so that you don't get paint streaks on your print. Now, once I've mixed this with the potassium dichromate, I don't want to try to save this, or I especially don't want to dump this back in my container with the pigment in it. So this is a one-shot use, and when you're done, just go ahead and rinse this out down a drain that's not in your kitchen, someplace where you're not cooking food and stuff, because the potassium dichromate is poisonous. So you want to, wash this out in the basement sink or something, outside in a bucket of really soapy water, and then dump the water down the toilet. So this is my first color that I've gone ahead and coated on the paper. And what I wanted you to see here is something that happens that's kind of interesting is because when you add the potassium dichromate and the paint dries, it always appears to be a little bit more yellow. So it looks like green right here, but this is actually blue, and it will come out blue when I print it. When I expose it and develop it, it'll look blue again. But because the potassium dichromate mixed in with the pigment, when you paint it on there, don't freak out. It's going to still be the same color that it started with, but that potassium dichromate kind of stains it when it's you know, painted onto the watercolor paper and once it's dried. So this was the first color that I painted on there. And then this is an image of the piece of transparency film lined up with the push pins on top of the pigment right there. So I put this first one down and I registered it. Even though there's not an image underneath that pigment right now, I still want to register it so that when the next images go on top of there, I will be able to keep them aligned. So after my 4-minute exposure in my ultraviolet LED lights, this is what the print looked like after 3 20-minute washes. So again, it's not a running water wash. It's just simply a tray filled with 70 75 degree water, and the print was floated upside down. So when I first put it in there, I will just give it a little bit of a swish. And again, the picture side is down. The picture side is up in this picture just so you could see it. But when this is developing, it's developing with the picture side down. And you need to make sure you have enough water in the tray that it's not touching the bottom of the tray. So you need to, I use 1 gallon in each of my trays, and I think they're 13 by 19 trays or something. So they're fairly big trays. They're bigger than 11 by 14, but they 1 gallon gives me about 3/4 of an inch of solution in there. So there's 3/4 of an inch solution of 70 degree water, and the print is floating upside down in there for 20 minutes. And then I will simply pick the print up. I lay that in another clean tray face side up so it's not disturbed. I'll dump out that solution that's you'll see it. It'll be all murky, full of this solution was blue from the blue paint, so I dumped that out in a bucket because I'm working in a dry sink. And then I'll pour another gallon of water in there, and then put the print back in the emulsion side or picture side down. And after I do 3 of these, gallons, my bucket will hold 3 gallons, and I'll take that and I'll dispose it in the toilet and then flush it again. Um, to get rid of the old water. You don't want to dump that in your kitchen sink or dump that in the sink where you're, going to be cooking or cleaning eating utensils or anything. And this is how the blue color came out. Then, so what I recommend at this point, you're probably tired, so I would head over to City Barbecue and get yourself a pulled pork sandwich or some chicken or something, and nourish yourself because you're in for an all nighter here making these things. So some of the pigment is semi-transparent. That I'm using. Sometimes you won't be able to see the image at all, but in this particular case with this red, I was able to, still see the image. But this is why the registration marks help. So this has not been exposed yet. This is just the red pigment after I painted it on the image, and I wanted you to see what it looks like once it's been painted on there. So again, the red was made the same way that I made the blue. I took 4 caps of the gum arabic, and I put that in that little container, and then I squirted the whole tube of red, the 5 ml tube, into the 4 caps of gum arabic, and then stirred it with a craft stick, and then I shook it quite a bit. Then what I did is, again, I put 1 teaspoon of that pigmented gum arabic into this glass container, and then I added 1 teaspoon of the potassium dichromate into this, and then stirred that up with the stick a little bit, and then I brushed it on. And at this point, I would be ready to air dry the print, or air dry this emulsion with a hair dryer on cool air. You could also just leave it, set for an hour or two in a room that has no light, so it'd have to be totally dark, and you can just let it, cool, dry in the air, as long as you have a a room that's not too humid. It'll dry in about an hour or so, but you can just dry it with a hair dryer, which is what I did in this case. Now, because my exposure times are so short, I'm able to get a couple of these going at one time. And when I made this first one over here with the red, um, I gave that 4 minutes, and what I found out, it was too much time for the. I wasn't getting any detail really where the sunflowers were with this particular image, so I made this one over here. I recoded a second print with blue, and then I developed the blue and everything just like I did, and then I put the red on, and I only did the red for 3 minutes on this one, so I cut back on the color. But both of these are nice. I mean, both of them are acceptable for this class because it's a beginning class, but um, I just wanted to show you the difference like that 1 minute could make. And both of these had been developed for 1 hour, 3 20-minute baths, 3 20-minute water baths to develop them. So this is what two different prints look like, and then we'll be moving on to the third color, which in this case is going to be yellow because I'm trying to go with cyan, magenta, and yellow. So the first color, the blue that I put on there, is actually, I'm calling it cyan, and the red that I put on here, I'm calling it magenta. It's looks a little bit more magenta than over here. It looks to me a little bit orange, but I think it would be much more dramatic or natural looking if I had the process colors, if I actually had cyan, magenta, and yellow watercolor pigment. And here's a close-up of the image that I like better. And again, this is just two colors at this point. Um, but you could kind of see, I really kind of like what's going on here. The tones in Maya are, coming around. And some of these were shadows, so that's why they're looking kind of blue over here. So they were actually shadows in the image. This was a darker area. But I think the tones are, very interesting. So we'll call this a studio gum print. And here's a close up of the other one. This is the first one that I actually started with, and this is the one that the 4 minutes of light was just too much on the red. You could see that, and this just came out of the wash. There's still a little bit of water on it, but you could see that, even after an hour of washing, the red was still on there. So I could, basically I think wash this all night, and the red wouldn't come off it. So it's pretty easy, I think, to tell. Um, if they got too much exposure because they just won't wash out. So it should wash out within an hour. Within 3 20-minute washes, you should be able to see everything that comes out of it, and the water should be clear at that point. So if you put it in another tray of water, if you still see the pigment color in the water, it does mean that it needs to be washed some more, because you do want to wash it until the pigment has totally come out of the print. Now, some people use a clearing bath. I've never used a clearing bath, but you can use EDTA, and you can read about that in the textbook if you wanted to try to use a clearing bath. But and some people actually use a hardening bath too to try to harden these up once they're done. But I found that once they're dry, they're pretty good and pretty durable, and they're not going to flake off or anything. And this is just an image showing you how I hang them to dry. You can dry them with the hair dryer, but I just like to hang them to dry. And I have a wire, going between two walls, and then I have these little clips up here that you can get at the office supply store. And I have a tray down below so this doesn't drip like on your floor. You want to make sure that you're catching any of the drippings for this in case it has any of the potassium dichromate in it. That's really important for your exposure and for your safety. So you don't want to just hang these in the basement, in other words, and let them drip on your floor. You want to catch the residue that's dripping off of it. Just, let it dry. It'll dry in like an hour or two, and be ready to go again. But this here was actually the finished print. You can see the yellow on here up in there. We'll take a close-up look at this shot now of the finished print. Now I did three coats. I did the blue, the red, and the yellow, or cyan, magenta, and yellow, which was I was trying to achieve. But if you look in the textbook and read up on this, some people actually do up to like 30 coats on one gum print. So they really go far. And the yellow is really not showing up all that much on this. And I did the yellow actually. I went back to 4 minutes because I did do a test, and at 3 minutes it wasn't enough. So I went back to the 4 minutes for the yellow, and exposed this one for 4 minutes, and it's still not real heavy, but I could certainly put another coat of yellow on here if I wanted to. I ran out of time. I worked 2 days on this project, literally, to get this done. So I mean, but I ran out of time and for putting. I wasn't going to get to putting 30 coats on this, but you can just keep going with this. Now a lot of people actually will put a black coat on it too. They call that the K layer, and I've never done that, but you can read about that in the textbook too, or search some other tutorials online if you wanted to add a black coat. So let's take a look at the finished picture that I made this weekend. So this is the final print that I came up with, and I really like it. It's not true to color, in other words, like a true color gum print would be, but it's kind of close, and it does have some more artistic attributes to it that making it more colorful. And some people might like this better than an actual color print, but the choice is up to you. But if you like it or not, but I like it, and um, I was really happy with it. So, but I'm going to go on. I think I'm going to use these same transparencies now to just try a red, green, and blue print, to use the red, green, and blue pigments and see what the difference in that is. And then once I do that, what I'm going to do is move on to making another set of transparencies, again of the same image, but rather than printing them in color, I will print them in black and white. So you can see there's just a whole lot of experimenting that you can do here with these prints. And again, if you're rushed for time, then this isn't the process for you. But if you do have the time, this is a process you can carry on with, and really learn a lot about. And all these processes, I guess the purpose of the class is to try to expose you to different processes. But I've had students in the past that have really picked up on this, and this was their way of photography after this. So in other words, all the prints that they made as gum prints. And it depends on if you like it or not, and you like the appearance of it. But you've been exposed to it in the class, but that's really the purpose of the class is to expose you to it, but it's also to show you something that you might like and excel at, and keep working in. So just like this is something that's involved with photography, just like you became involved with photography and you like doing photography, this might be something else you might really like and get involved with. So um, anyway, I hope that helps. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up and hit the subscribe channel, and there'll be more videos coming. Thank you.